Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made for a Punched Out Thursday to Die For. In a Punched Out Thursday to Die For, we use our punches and our dies to create scrapbooking layouts. And today I'm going to be making one of my favorite things, which is a Halloween layout. I'm starting off with this Stampin' Up punch. I'm punching out some bats out of some black glitter paper. And I love this punch. I love the way the bats are 3 different sizes and 3 different shapes. I think that'll help to make them look interesting on the background of my layout. And then I'm using a Martha Stewart border punch. This is a spider web punch. So I'm punching a strip of spider webs out of this purple paper. And the paper that I use on this layout was made by Little Yellow Bicycle, and the collection is called Frightful. It must be a really old collection because Little Yellow Bicycle hasn't been manufacturing paper for quite a long time. And now I'm using a Martha Stewart corner punch, which I believe is meant for one of those punch around the page punch sets. And this is the corner piece, but I was thinking that I could use this corner piece to make photo corners. And so I used some black glitter paper and I punched out the corner and then I cut it so that it would be kind of a photo corner, and it worked out really well. I'm using some Distress ink in black soot, and I'm inking the edges of the papers that I'm going to be using on my layout. I have a thin strip of striped paper and then this larger strip of black and orange dots, or black paper with orange dots on it. And then I'm also going to ink that border strip that I cut out. I didn't have a 12-inch long strip of the purple paper, so I cut 2 strips and I'm going to piece them together so that I have a continuous strip in the background of my layout. I'm going to use this kind of scrap piece of white cardstock and I'm going to attach the pattern paper to it because I want to create a mixed media background. Here you can see that I'm using a strip of ATG adhesive. It broke inside the gun, so I tried to get the adhesive off by just pressing the tape down against my paper until I had a long enough piece to wind up in the gun, and then it was able to work again. If you don't have an ATG gun, that might not make any sense, but I was just trying to get the most out of my adhesive. I had to trim off a little bit of the white cardstock because it was showing behind the paper. And then after I did that, I used some Distress ink and I inked the edges. Now I put some adhesive behind the right side of the strip and I'm going to place it on top of my strip of spider webs, and that way you'll be able to see a little more than half of it from the front. But before I could attach the strip down to the larger piece of paper, I had to piece it together. So I tried very hard to match it up so you wouldn't be able to see where I had joined the 2 pieces of paper. Then I pressed the pattern paper into the strip of spider webs, and then I used my scissors and I cut off the excess on either side. So the pattern paper is going to go on the left-hand side of the layout. I'm going to have mixed media on the right-hand side. And then I'm going to add a number of pieces of cardstock behind my photo. And you can see that I just took a picture because I wanted to make sure that I remembered the date. I've definitely gotten better about that. I used to constantly forget to write down the date, and that would cause a lot of problems. Sometimes I'd have to peel up my photo afterwards, but I've learned to use my phone to take a picture of the back of the photo, and then later on when the layout is complete, I will note the date of the photo on the back of my layout. I'm using a few pieces of the pattern paper from that same collection, and I'm going to layer them behind the photo. I have a lot of strips of paper from this collection. I purchased it from eBay. Somebody was selling some full pieces of paper, and they also included a whole bunch of strips of paper. And so I find it really nice to have some of the papers already cut into, because sometimes I don't like to cut into papers, especially when they're really beautiful Halloween papers. So it was really helpful to have a couple that were already cut, and then I was able to further cut into them without having to worry that I had ruined, in quotes, a piece of paper. If you've watched my channel for a while, you may know that although I really love some of the latest papers and I think they're doing amazing things with scrapbooking papers these days, I also really love some of the older papers. and I am still purchasing them. I don't buy as many as I used to because I have quite a stash now, but I really love some of the older papers, and I think that they're worth picking up when I see some of my favorites for sale. I use the Tim Holtz Distresser. I distressed the edges of all of the papers. I use some of the Distress ink to ink the edges as well. And then I also bent up some of the papers a little bit more just so they would look extra distressed for this Halloween layout. I certainly don't mind distressing many papers on many layouts, but for Halloween, I wanted to make sure that things looked a little more grungy than usual. With a pencil, I drew a line where the pattern paper is going to be. And then I used a piece of plastic and some Distress ink and hickory smoke. I sprayed some water on the plastic, and then I used that to move the ink all around the background. I cleaned off the plastic before applying more of the Distress ink because I didn't want my ink pad to get all wet. And then I repeated the same process in the background. When I was making this layout, I was having a weird day. It wasn't a bad day, but just a lot of weird things were happening. I guess it wasn't the best day ever, and I found the process of making this background really made my day so much better. I know that some people are not huge fans of mixed media, and others like mixed media, but they haven't yet tried it themselves, and I really would encourage you to give it a try. It's so much fun, and it is wonderful to just lose yourself in the creative process. Even if the layout doesn't turn out exactly the way I want it to, I find that decision making and the act of applying the color to the paper, it just is a very enjoyable process. It wasn't at first, so it takes a little while, I think, before you can enjoy what you're doing, because I think you have to have a certain amount of confidence that even though it might not look amazing in the beginning, that it'll turn out okay. But I really hope that if you're even slightly considering trying mixed media, that you give it a go. I really hope that you'll try it, or at least consider it. So I used the hickory smoke and I spread it in the background in kind of a half circle. And I also put some in the upper right-hand corner where I'm going to have a smaller cluster. I added some splatters of the hickory smoke. And then I also sprinkled some water over the top. The water, when a paper towel is rolled on top of it, will pick up the color in the background, and it creates a really cool droplet effect. I know someone's going to ask me where I got this stencil, and I think I might have gotten it from AliExpress or Temu. I'm not really sure. I don't order from them too often, but I did place an order with both of them probably about 8 or 9 months ago, and I couldn't resist buying this stencil. In this layout, instead of using it with modeling paste, I decided that I would try using it as a stamp. So I don't recall ever trying this before. I stamped the Distress ink and black soot onto the stencil, and then I added some water, and then I used it as a stamp, and I pressed it down on the background. And then I used my heat tool and I dried it so that when I stamped it again, I wouldn't mess up the stamping that I already put down. And I really loved the effect. I thought that this came out really cool. The only problem, though, was that it looked dark right away, but then as the watercolor dried, the color of the web really faded a lot, and I didn't like that. But I do think of a solution in a few moments. There's another hop that I participate in called Stamp It Like It's Hot, and one of the upcoming prompts is to use a stencil like a stamp, and I think that's what gave me the idea to do this on this layout. So now I'll have to either use the same stencil or find another stencil to use as a stamp on another layout, but this particular stencil really lends itself to this technique. I think that the spider web is coming out really cool. Like I said, I wanted it to be a little bit darker. And then also when I place the photo back on top, it kind of covers up some of the areas that I liked the best. So that was unfortunate. Sometimes that happens with mixed media. I wanted to add something else to the background, but I wasn't quite sure what to add yet. So I decided I would add some splatters. So I watered down some more of the Distress ink and splattered that in the background, and then used the rest of it and used the packaging technique and squished it around the area that I already had the color in. And then I was thinking I only have gray and black, and I wanted to add a little bit more color to the background. So I decided that I was going to add some splatters in some traditional Halloween colors. So I added 3 different colors of Shimmerz Paints. The first one was a Spritz called Sweet Pea, and that's a pretty purple color. And then I also added some droplets of water to the background, just repeated that same process where I add the droplets of water and lift it up with the paper towel. I usually do that more than once when I'm making a background, because as I layer paints on top of each other, some of the droplets get covered up. So then I had another idea. I decided that I would use some heavy body acrylic paint. I painted it onto the stencil, and then I realized I had to spray a little bit of water for the paint to come off. And then once the stencil is upside down on the layout, I realized I probably could use a brayer to roll on top to transfer the color. So I tried that out, and then I thought that that came out the way that I wanted, the way that I was picturing it in my head, because I wanted the spider webs to be a little bit darker. And then I added some splatters of the black acrylic paint, and those splatters are a little bit darker. So I have some gray splatters, I have some black distress ink splatters, I have some black acrylic paint splatters, and then I have the purple splatters as well. And then I added a little bit more of the purple splatters to the background. And then I added another round of the stamping using the black acrylic paint. And now I'm adding a couple of droplets of white. And the white splatters are some watered down white acrylic paint. So you can see that the background is made up of stenciling, of squishing down color, and of adding splatters of all different kinds. Now I'm adding a second color. This is a Coloringz called Tangy Tangerine, and I think it's the perfect bright orange color for a Halloween layout. So I add that in the area to the right where there's going to be the little cluster, and also in the large area. And then I do the same thing with a green paint that's a Spritz called Bamboo Leaf. And then I dry the background, and I'm ready to attach down my pattern paper. The pattern paper is a little bit shorter on the top than the background paper. So later on, I use my paper trimmer and I just trim off the white edge that's at the top. Here I have my photo, and I told you it was kind of a weird day. I always remember to turn off the overhead light when I film in my scrapbooking room, but on this day I forgot, so I'm so sorry. There's a glare on the photo that's a little distracting, but I can't go back and refilm it, so I have to apologize for that. I used some dies that I just recently bought from Cre8tive Artz. They are banner dies, and they have a nice stitching around the edge, and they're nested. They come in a variety of different sizes. I'm going to say about 5 different sizes. So I picked the largest banner, and then the next size down. I cut out some pattern paper in orange, and then I cut out a little scrap of green that I had. I think that's some packaging from some scrapbooking product from quite a while ago. I inked the edges of both of those banners, and I attached those to the right-hand side of my photo. And then I looked through some of my Halloween embellishments. I had just recently bought an ephemera pack from Michaels from this year, and so I decided to use some of those pieces. I have a ticket, and then I have a large card. It has a skeleton on it, but you won't be able to see the skeleton because I have that tucked behind my photo. And then I also had a pumpkin for a little while, but I decided not to use that. I did use a title from that pack. It says Happy Hallows Eve. And then I began adding those bats that I punched out earlier, and I made 3 different clusters with them. Although the cluster that's to the right of the photo near the banners, I'm going to move that because I want to add other embellishments in that area. The photo that I'm using, it's a photo of my daughter Julia, taken not on Halloween, but during the Halloween season where she was dressed up several years ago now. And I just love Halloween. I didn't always love Halloween as much as I do now, but because I've had kids and my husband are really into Halloween, it's contagious, and now I'm a big fan of it as well. But probably my favorite thing about Halloween is the scrapbooking layouts. I absolutely love scrapbooking Halloween, and I know that's not everybody's thing. I also like Christmas. I also like summer layouts, but I like the way all of those different seasons have a different color palette and a different style. So I really like the changing of the seasons and the different holidays, and Halloween is, I think, my ultimate favorite. Okay, so I finally realized that the light was on, so now I think you can see the layout a little bit better. There was a little bit too much light before. And I was thinking that I could cut that card that I have the bats on in half, and then I could continue it going down the left-hand side of the photo and then put an embellishment in between so you didn't see where the two cards met. And the embellishment that I used to cover up that seam says Trick or Treat. That's a chipboard piece. I had a bag of kind of random chipboard Halloween embellishments, so I was looking through that to see which ones I thought I could include on this layout. And in addition to that larger circle, I also found some smaller ones, and I'm going to include those on the layout. There are 3 of them. I use a tiny green skull, a tiny skull and crossbones, and then a little tiny bat. And they're so tiny, but I just love those little chipboard pieces. And they move around the layout a little bit, but all 3 of them stay put. I also tried some sentiments. I ended up removing those from the layout. And then I was thinking I need another something or other on the top of the layout. So I found a card, and I decided that I just needed the top of the card. There was a sentiment on the bottom that I thought I could use on another layout. And then I wanted to make sure that the title stood out, so I attached it down to a piece of black cardstock, and then I fussy cut a border all around it. I'm not sure if anybody wonders what the brands are of the embellishments that I use, but just in case you are wondering, the sticker pack that's off to the left, that's made by Paper House, and I used a couple of those embellishments on the layout. I used the 31 that is underneath the Trick or Treat sign, the orange one. That's from that pack. I also used a little key that is right next to the title. And then I was going to use a crow that's in a cage that was in that set, but then I decided instead to use a chipboard piece that says Halloween. And I had to use a Sharpie to cover up some little imperfections in that piece. And then from a Martha Stewart sticker pack, I found a black sparkly moon, so I decided to include that in the upper right-hand corner. And then I noticed that there was a spider hanging from its web in that Paper House Halloween pack, so I decided that I would have the spider hanging from the moon. And then I used a little bit of gesso, and I cleaned up some of the areas in the background. The background is very messy, and I was okay with that just because it's a Halloween layout, and I'm okay with lots of messiness usually, but especially on a Halloween layout. But I wanted to clean up a few places, so I used some gesso to fade out some of those spots. And then I added some jewels to the backgrounds. I'm adding some black sparkly jewels. I add 2 different sizes of jewels to the 2 banners. I added some small jewels to the photo corners. I moved that piece of chipboard that says Halloween over to the left. And now the layout is all done. And here are a few close-ups. Please take a look in the description box where you'll find links to the channels of Sonia, Ronnie Sue, and Kathy, who make some beautiful Punched Out Thursday to Die For videos and lots of other great videos too. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch this video, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. I'm not sure how many Halloween layouts I'll have time to make this year, but I was really happy to make this one. I really enjoyed it. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.